Hey, Phil Ebner here from videoschoolonline.com. In this 30-minute Adobe video, we're going to learn how to use Adobe After Effects. So let's get started. I'm going to open up Adobe After Effects. I'm using the CC 2017 version right now. You can use really whatever version. A lot of what we're going to do in this lesson, you can do even in a previous version of After Effects. When you open up After Effects for the first time, you won't see recent files like I see right here. These are just projects that I've worked on in the past. What you'll want to do, and what I'm going to do, is just click New Project. Nothing happens in After Effects, unlike if you're used to Premiere Pro, where it opens up a box where you have to set your settings and name your project. Nothing has actually happened, and I actually don't have a project that I've saved yet. The first thing we have to do is start doing something. And so a quick sort of tour of After Effects. We have our files up here, our menus up here. We do a lot of stuff up here, like creating new project sequences or compositions, adding effects. A lot of that can be done right within all these panels as well. If your After Effects doesn't look like this, just go up to Window, Workspace, and set it to the default workspace. On the left, you have your project panel. This is where you can import footage, media, any type, really, photos, videos, graphics, anything you can bring in there. In the middle is your composition window. This is where you will actually see the video you're working on. You'll do a lot of changes and editing right within there. On the right, you have your different panels for adjusting settings, such as here you see the character panel is open. You can just click on any of these to open any of these other panels. And then down below, you have the timeline, which is also a very important part of After Effects. The first thing I do in After Effects, if I'm not importing any graphics or media, because with After Effects, a lot of what you can do is either importing video footage and editing that footage, doing visual effects, or creating more motion graphics within After Effects. And a lot of those effects and graphics you can create right within After Effects without anything else. And that's what we're going to do today. To create a new composition, which if you're used to Premiere Pro is similar to a new sequence, just click this New Composition button. Here you'll want to choose the settings that match the video project you're working on. If you're just creating a graphic or a video project all within Adobe After Effects, you can really choose whatever you want. HDTV, they have these presets. The HDTV 1080 2997 is a great one. The width, height, 1920 by 1080 is great for HD viewing online. The frame rate's great. If you are using After Effects in conjunction with another video project or video, say you're using After Effects and Premiere Pro, you'll want to match the settings that you choose here with the settings that you're working with in Adobe Premiere Pro. So for example, a lot of my video I shoot at the 23976 frame rate, so I'll change the frame rate of my After Effects project to that. The duration of your composition, this is like the duration of your sequence, is set in After Effects. You can always extend it later, but for me, I'm just going to change it to 5 seconds. Leave the rest of these as is and click OK. Now I have this composition open up in the middle, and now I can save my project, which is the first thing you should do. So I'm going to press Command S to save. Now I can choose where I want to save this. Let me save it in our After Effects folder, AE in 30, and then click Save. Quickly, if you do want to import graphics, I have some graphics that I can show you how to import from the other Adobe in 30 Minutes courses that I've done. For example, if we have video that we want to bring in, we can just bring in that video right here, drag it into our project panel. It's going to import that video. Like Premiere Pro, again, if you want to organize your footage, you can click this bin, or in After Effects, it's called a folder, to create folders. So for example, I personally would create video folders, photo folders, music folders, sound effects if I'm doing that within After Effects. A lot of that kind of editing I'd personally like doing in Premiere Pro, like any audio editing, any just normal video editing. I typically only use After Effects to create the graphics or to add visual effects. To add video to a composition, what I can do is just drag it right into the composition window here, or drag it into the timeline right here. And I don't have any tracks like Premiere Pro, but if I drop this in here, what happens is I create a new layer in After Effects. And I can drag this footage left to right to adjust where it's playing. So it's a little different than Premiere Pro. And the way I explain how Premiere Pro works is that it's an editor for sort of linear editing across time, going from one shot to the next, to the next, to the next. Whereas After Effects is all about layering, adding text, then shapes, then other visual effects, adjustments, layers. So it's more of a vertical style of editing. So here we have our shot that we put in, which is a great background. If I delete this, or if I want to turn it off with this little eyeball button out on here, which you can do for any layer, you see that the background of this composition is transparent. How do I know it's transparent? Because I see this checkerboard pattern. If you don't see that, check this little toggle transparency grid button. That will change what it looks like. It's not actually changing what the background is, it just allows you to see if it's transparent or not. If that bothers you though, and you just want a black background, you can just turn that off. But I like having that there for now anyways. The next thing I want to cover are all the tools, or at least the main tools that you have up here to use. You have your selection tool. The keyboard shortcut is V, and if you hover over any of these, you see the keyboard shortcut. You have rectangle or shape tools, and if you click and hold any of these tools, they might have other options. For example, an ellipse or a polygon. The pen tool is a great tool for creating custom shapes or masks. The type tool, you've got other more advanced tools like the clone stamp, eraser tool, roto brush tool, which is great for rotoscoping and actually sort of getting rid of backgrounds, green screen, motion tracking, that kind of stuff. The puppet pin tool, which is cool for animating too. Those are a little bit more advanced. And I have and will have more tutorials on these kinds of things on the Video School Online YouTube channel. To use any of these tools, just click it, and then depending on what it is, you just kind of click and drag in the composition window. So now I have the shape tool selected. There's properties that pop up depending on what tool you have. So for shape, I have the fill and the stroke. If I want to add a stroke, say I want to just make sort of an outline of a rectangle, I can turn off the fill by clicking the fill text right there, choosing it to none. And with the stroke, I can set the width to something a little bit wider by clicking and dragging the pixels from left to right, or by clicking in there and setting a pixel width. I can change the color by clicking this little color box right here and say we want a red, sort of reddish gray box. Click OK. And now if I click here, finally we have this red rectangle that I've created. You'll notice that a shape layer also pops up down here in our timeline. If we move this down beneath our other layers, it's going to disappear. Let me turn on the shot one. So now you don't see the shape layer, but if I put it on top, you see the shape layer. Let's add one more layer to this, and then we're going to work with our timeline. Let's take the text tool. If I click anywhere on my composition and start typing, you'll see that text starts to appear. Over here on the right hand side, the character panel opens up, and if I highlight all of this text, I can change the size, the spacing, the kerning, the leading, all kinds of things in this shape. One cool thing about After Effects is there's an align panel. So if I have any layer selected, and I might just go back to our selection tool so I can easily select our layers, and then I click the center and horizontal, vertical and horizontal center, it will center it to the composition. Or if I select both of these and I horizontally and vertically center them, it will center them to each other. Got it? So first, let's actually just center the background shape layer to the composition itself, and then the text. And let's change the color of the text. Go to the character panel, choose the fill color, and let's just pick something like light blue or something like that. Something a little different. Cool, so now we have 3 different layers in our timeline. One of the biggest aspects of After Effects are the properties for each layer. To get to the different properties on each layer, you can click this drop down triangle, which brings the transform properties of the layer. And pretty much any layer down here will have these same transform properties: anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Click and drag any of these, or click within and type in a number to adjust what this property is. Scale, for example, we can scale up, and you can see that the scale is scaling from the bottom of the middle L, and that's where the anchor point is. If we want it to scale from, say, the center, we have to move the anchor point. We can do that with this anchor point position property down here, or there's actually a tool that allows us to move the anchor point up here, the pan behind tool. And if we do that and then select our anchor point, then if we hold down the command key, that actually helps us because it allows us, it kind of locks or snaps the anchor point to different points of this layer. And if we want it to be perfectly in the center so that when we scale it, it scales from the center, that's how we would do it. Keyboard shortcuts are great for making you a more efficient editor. For any of these properties, you have a keyboard shortcut. T brings up opacity, S brings up scale, P brings up position, R brings up rotation, and A brings up anchor point. So the weird one there was T for opacity, and that's just because O takes you to the out point of this project or this timeline. So we have a different one, T. Say you want to adjust multiple layers at the same time, you can select two layers. Say we want to change the size, press S, and then drop the scale of those two layers with them both selected. In terms of working with your timeline, you can use the scrub tool to just scrub through. You can press the space bar to play through, or to nudge one frame at a time. You have to press Command on a Mac or Control on a PC and use the arrow keys to go one frame at a time. These are basic properties, and knowing how to use these properties and animate these properties is what will really take your After Effects work to the next level. And you can do some amazing animations just with some simple animations. To animate any of these properties, for any of these ones we've seen or any effect that we apply, we have to use what's called a keyframe. A keyframe basically is telling After Effects that at this point in time, we want this layer to have this property. So for example, if we want the size of hello right here to be right here at the start of the video, we can set a keyframe for the scale. And to set a keyframe for any property, just click the stopwatch icon to the left of that property's title. So there you see that I clicked there, and now we have this little diamond that appears on the timeline. That's a keyframe. So at that point in time, we've told After Effects that we want it to be 100% scale. At 1 second, what if we want that hello to be 150%? What we can do is just type in 150%. What happens is, because we've changed the actual number here, it created a new keyframe because it's telling that After Effects that from this point to this point, it needs to change. Well, what happens if at 0 seconds it's 100% and then at 1 second it's 150%? There's an animation. It doesn't just jump. So here you can see that if you play this, it actually increases in size. What if we want to do the same sort of thing, but with the shape layer? We can actually just copy these keyframes. So I can hover over them or click and drag over those two keyframes, copy them by pressing Command C, select my shape layer, and then paste, Command V. Now if I play this, both the shape layer and the hello kind of increases in size. What if we want to reverse this animation? Easy, we can just reverse these keyframes by just dragging this first one to the right and this second one to the left. So now if we line them up, we have a kind of interesting animation that goes like that. Now, not perfect. It's not a really amazing animation, but now you know how to create an animation with keyframes. And you can do that with really any of the properties in After Effects. So say we want to create a quick transition, an opacity transition. I can select both of these layers, press T on my keyboard, set a keyframe for 100%, and actually select those two and drag to the right, and then drag the opacity down to 0 to set another keyframe for 0. So now these actually fade on. Pretty cool, huh? So you can imagine all of the different types of motion graphics you can create with those kinds of animations. And if you go to the Video School Online YouTube channel, you can learn how to make all kinds of lower thirds, titles, other types of motion graphic animations. The last thing I want to talk about in this sort of preview of After Effects is the Effects tab. If we go to Effects and Presets, you have all kinds of different effects that you can add. Everything from color correction to stylizing. Let's just drop down stylize, and you can see if I take any of these and I drag it onto our video layer, what happens is it's applied, and in the top left, the Effects Controls tab was opened, and that was behind the Project tab. With basically any of these effects, you'll have properties. I can open up these properties and see what I'm doing. Some of them, there's different presets. If I change this, there's different presets, or I can go in and customize it myself. I've never even used this kind of effect, but it's kind of cool. There are also presets. So if you go to animation presets, there's lots of little presets that you can add. For example, if we want a transition, let's do a transition wipe. And then if we just drag one of these corner reveal onto this, you'll see that now there's a transition, a corner wipe transition from top to the bottom. How do we change this animation, the speed or the timing of it? We bring up the keyframes and we edit the keyframes. To bring up the keyframes for any layer, select the layer and press U on your keyboard. You'll see that this corner reveal transition goes from 0% to 100%. If we want to make this animation faster, what do we have to do? We have to bring those keyframes closer together. So let's take this second keyframe and put it at 12 frames instead of 1 second. So now it's a lot faster. So I'll let you play around with all of the different effects that you have over in the Effects and Presets window. How do you export a graphic? If you want to just export it as a video file, the easiest way is to go up to Composition, go to Add to Render Queue. This will open up the Render Queue tab down here where you can choose your settings. There are different presets. If you click this down arrow next to Output Module, I've created an H.264 preset, but they have different presets. Or you can click the text to the right where it says lossless. And here you have your Output Module settings. Here you can go into the format options. You can choose what you want. Apple ProRes is a great full resolution file. So if you're actually using this for a video project, I would suggest using either an animation or an Apple ProRes 4444 type of codec. That's going to be perfect quality, full resolution, no sort of compression at all. Or if you're trying to export it but have a smaller file size, H.264. And if you have H.264, you can limit the data rate depending on how big your video project is. For example, if it's 1920 by 1080, you might want to do something like 16,000, the data rate. Or if it's, 1280 by 720, maybe 8,000. Or if you're trying to save space, you can decrease that. When you're happy with these settings, click OK. To choose where you're actually going to save it, just click this text next to Output To. I can choose what the folder that I want to save it. I'll call this graphic, click Save. And now to actually export it, just choose Render. You can also do a very similar thing where you can export via Adobe Media Encoder if you want to actually work on your After Effects projects while things are exporting in the background. What you would do is go up to Composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. You can set your settings there, similar to in Adobe Premiere Pro, and render there too. So that's a quick rundown of how you can get started with Adobe After Effects. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you thought this was a little too fast, if you still don't understand how to use After Effects, I have a full Adobe After Effects course that I encourage you to check out. It will break down all of these steps and walk through things more thoroughly with more detail, and it's more project based. So you can actually be creating your projects as we work through the lessons. So check that out at videoschoolonline.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you in another tutorial.